Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lethal Weapon as well as the latest episode of Blindspot. Starting off with Lethal Weapon, this week's case dealt mostly with, this whole $17 million being robbed from that armored car, and it ended up giving us an opportunity to get a little bit more on Roger's side of the story of things, like kind of learning a little bit more about him because we got introduced to his training officer, Ned, who, interestingly enough, is I don't know the actor's name, but he played kind of the lieutenant slash captain or whatever for Monk. Yeah, most recently I saw him in some episodes, obviously some episodes of Ray Donovan. He was in like two or three of them this recent season, so. But it was like a crazy episode because you had the 17 million going missing, and then you find out like that two people connected to it because they were like the only two people that really knew about the route and everything. Lonnie and Donnie had their heads cut off, so it looks like it's some kind of cartel that might be connected, and that is ultimately what it is that essentially basically being like that whole legal weed legalizing and stuff like that. Weed businesses are cutting into the cartel's profits because weed is kind of like one of their sources of income, so one of the drugs they kind of sell and everything. It was kind of an interesting situation where you ended up finding out that Ned ended up stealing the truck. He ended up figuring out it was Lonnie and Donnie. He wasn't the one that killed them and severed their heads, but he was the one that stole the truck from him because he figured out it was them by the shoes they were wearing. But he didn't really say anything just because he didn't really have any money left. His wife had died and everything, and he was just kind of strapped for cash. And it just kind of he just saw the opportunity. He stole it. So it was an interesting moment between Riggs and Murtaugh where Roger was going to do his job and just outright arrest him, but Riggs kind of told him like, no, let's not do that. He presented the opinion that if they did do that, there's no way Ned would survive in prison. It was just, he's an older guy, plus there are cartel guys in the jail too, in particular the main suspect behind the beheadings and stuff like that. Well, it wasn't him in particular. He did kind of torture them. I don't remember him actually saying whether or not he actually killed them or not, but definitely he was torturing them, and they told him they didn't have they didn't have the money. But like for example, if they took Ned in, then maybe that maybe because they'd recognize him as like, oh, he was the armor car driver, so like maybe he have something to do with this. Maybe they were thinking like that, or maybe they were simply thinking like he's just an older guy and he won't survive in prison, especially him being an ex-cop and all that. So. But I think also another side of it, Riggs presented that as his main argument, but I'm pretty sure that he also did it for Murtaugh's sake, because he realized how important Ned is to Roger. Like, Ned helped form him, make him into the cop that he is today. So, because that whole Ned situation, because we're finding out that about his wife having died, was it like ovarian cancer or something like that a couple months prior. It kind of put things in perspective for Roger, because him and his wife had constantly kept putting off date night. They haven't had a date night in like 4 months, and the opportunity came up, but work kept getting in the way. And just that whole thing, hearing about Ned's story, the fact is that he was going to get in his 20 years, and the next 20 would just be them, but they didn't have that. And so it kind of got him thinking like, you shouldn't waste time, and he even kind of he brought it up with Riggs too, and he actually had to take himself a step back because he realized like he's bringing up the fact that like it could be gone in an instant, and he caught his own words. It's kind of interesting that the fact is that it's a touchy subject that Roger kind of forgets that he has to kind of tiptoe around, which I'm sure Martin doesn't want him to tiptoe around it. It's fine, it's just a conversation between friends. I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't like the term thrown around that they're friends, because even Ned made a comment about them making pretty good partners, and they're like, that's all we are. And but even in this episode, he did get his date night still got interrupted because the whole like going to Ned and finding out he's got the truck and everything. But at the end of it, he did kind of make it up to Trish, and they did kind of have their date night. Because in this episode, we also learned how they actually met each other. Like, he pulled her over for a ticket. When they went to court, she fought him in court about the whole thing. I don't mean physically, but just turning the tables on him. And she, in his words exactly, kicked his ass. And it was after that he ended up getting her number. And he kind of recreated that a little bit during the episode where he kind of pulls her over. She's like, oh, what is this? And then, like, she sees it as Roger, and, just kind of made a beautiful moment. I did like the fact that he was writing little notes to kind of say, like, trying to find the right way of saying, like, oh, I love you, trying to say it in a very romantic way, like trying to use a metaphor, like, they're going down the river of love and their children are the lifeboat that's keeping them afloat, or something like that. So, something I thought was very surprising in this episode is that Martin, to a certain degree, opened up a little bit to his therapist. He admitted to her the fact that he saw that commercial at the beginning of the episode and shot a CV. I wasn't expecting him to actually tell her that. So it is showing you that he is making some progress. He is opening up bit by bit, because he did, that stuff, even as close as they are, like, that shows you, like, he does have a friendship with Roger, but the fact is he still is hesitant to tell him anything. But, I guess, really, truth be told, he's hesitant to tell anybody anything. But I was quite surprised he told, her that. And also in this episode, you had him meeting up with Ronnie Delgado. As you can obviously piece together, like, it wasn't until this episode they really outright said it, but the context with everything, it's like, yeah, he's Miranda's father. And so he's kind of been keeping Riggs his job. Like, I brought that up before, that it's like they were always saying, like, oh, Riggs was able to keep his job because he has very powerful friends in high places, and that was in this particular case. He realizes that Riggs is kind of a reckless dude, but the fact of the matter is that I guess for him, Riggs is kind of like the last, like, kind of connection he has to his little girl, that, because even then, like, no matter what, Riggs is part of the family. And he was even saying, like, you come over, Miranda's mom wants you over for dinner, but Riggs just can't bring himself to do it. And even talks to his therapist. Well, his therapist kind of figures it out, and basically, Riggs is like, I can't be there right now. That's not what I need. And then she's like, it might not be what you need, but it's what he needs. That is just because, like, he needs something left of his daughter to hold on to, and why not the man that she brought into their family that's like a son to him. So I'd be kind of interested to see how that relationship develops as the series progresses. My favorite, some favorite moments in the episode is the whole situation Riggs did with the whole bringing Paco a sandwich in front of all those other people, being like, oh man, here's that sandwich you wanted. Now really, oh, I'm sorry, did you want this and that, making it sense? But you said you're going to turn on all those people, and they're looking at him like that, like kind of selling Paco out like he's kind of a informant for the police and everything. So I like that twist. As well as when their captain finds out, it's like, oh yeah, oh, he really took a cattle prod for you? And he's like, yeah. He's like, oh, I wouldn't take a cattle prod for you. And Roger kind of like, yeah, I know you wouldn't. So a really good episode. Like I said, very mix of different things: exciting, funny, sad, sweet. Just like I said, this show does a very good job of packaging a lot of emotions in it. So, and now moving on to this week's episode of Blindspot, where we have Jane basically being in a situation where, bluntly, she says it at the end of the episode, she doesn't know who to trust. She doesn't know who to trust Sandstorm. She doesn't know how to trust the FBI, because the FBI doesn't really trust her. She says she kind of even sees it in Kurt's eyes and the way he says things. And he's like, no, it's not like that. I don't mean it like that. She's like, yeah, you did. Especially because Roman shows her that, what's it called, Lake Aurora at the beginning of the episode. It was basically a place a lot of people lived, a whole bunch of families, but what they didn't know is that a company was constantly pumping stuff into the lake and made it very toxic, and a lot of people died, and the government did nothing about it. In Roman's words, we're not here to attack America, we're here to defend it against basically the people who use their powerful connections to just let evils and atrocities not only go by without any repercussions, but also sweeping it under the rugs because he brings up this as being like a thing that was never really broadcast. It was just kind of one of those. It's one of many stories in the U.S. that things happen and they don't get widespread media attention. Is what he was kind of getting at, and it led to a conversation between Shepard and Roman. Basically, Roman being like, Shepard has to tell Jane everything because they'll never get her back, because he's trying to inspire her, trying to get her to find some reasons to kind of ignite that spark in her. What originally made her fight before, kind of reignite that now. But like I said, it's still like Jane understands why they're fighting. Whether it's like I said, it's a very complicated situation of she doesn't know whether she is 100% for it or not. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't agree with their methods. Especially because, who she is now who she was before probably 100% agreed with her methods, but who she is now can't, because willing to sacrifice a lot of people and manipulate and kill a lot of people. It's just, that's not something that sits right with her, just because Jane is a very different person from Remy, because maybe if she remembers her experiences as Remy, maybe she'll be more open to the idea of working with Sandstorm, but for now, I don't know. I mean, what we did end up finding out near the end of the episode was that Lake Aurora is where Shepard is originally from. It also turns out that's also where Jane is originally from, too. So her family might be one of those many families that died. Well, I mean, I don't know. Well, yeah. I think because Shepard was basically saying that's where the story starts. Shepard lost a lot of her family. Her mom died pretty quickly. Her dad ended up, long, painful process, ended up losing a brother. And she herself had to have her ovaries removed at 17, so it's impossible for her to have children. So that's why Roman and Remy are so important to her, because they were kind of like a second chance for her. Because she even said it herself, it's like, oh, I came there saving you, but not realizing that you in a way kind of saved me. So, and it was kind of that conversation she has later on in the episode with that girl. Her mom was basically pinned to be like a terrorist. It ended up being kind of a big conspiracy that these CIA people were actually, whereas they were supposed to be breaking up this terrorist group, they basically were keeping it around and were using this particular terrorist group. She found it out, tried to run it up the chain of command, but they basically ended up blacklisting her. I mean, the best term I can use, they basically wiped her existence from the CIA, making it seem like she was never an operative, and made it look like she was a legit terrorist, and then handed her over to the terrorist group that she was kind of undercover with. And then they basically captured and tortured her. Now, this all kind of initially kind of hit it off with Jane, because it's like her story kind of reflected her as kind of really being turned against by people that you trusted, who you thought you could rely on, and also being tortured because, she had just recently got away from the CIA. I mean, she kind of frowns upon the CIA, so I'm sure this kind of just opened those wounds for her, because it's like, oh, the CIA screwed her over just like they screwed her, Jane over by torturing her and everything. Because at first I was thinking like, okay, like this whole thing was BS, but it's like, no, when the episode ended up progressing a little further, it's like, nope, you immediately find out like everything she was saying was true, that her husband and child were killed, and they showed her the photos and everything. Turns out the only one that was dead was her husband. Her daughter was still alive. One of the three people involved was someone she had an affair with, and he took her child because that was actually their child. And there was an interesting standoff between, like, after they killed the girl's dad, like, she immediately pulled a gun off and tried to shoot at them. Well, not tried, was actually shooting at them. But Jane talked her down, being like, I understand that you're in this situation. It's very confusing. You don't know who you can really trust. And, was able to calm her down, take her back to her mom. But sadly, even if that is the case, her mom's still in trouble for all the people the two other CIA connected people that she killed. I mean, granted, she had justified reasons. I mean, they tried to screw her over. They were working with a terrorist group, so maybe she'll face some kind of leniency. I don't know. The girl just got her mom back, especially after thinking her mom was dead. But Jane kind of pointed out the fact that she's going to lose her now too, and it's like Kurt kind of comments on the fact that she has a grandma that can take care of her, but still, that sucks. Being reunited with your mom after you think she's dead and just having to be taken from her arms again, especially, now, because, like, I mean, that's probably the only other family she really has is her grandma, because her dad's gone. Even her real dad's gone. The person she thought of as her dad is gone, and now her mom's being locked up. So, Jane did meet an interesting guy this episode named Oliver Kind at the museum and everything. Just kind of like I thought he'd be a bigger part of the plot, but he wasn't. But the fact is that he had a little interesting conversation with Jane. The fact that, like, kind of bringing up the whole Lake Aurora. I even liked the fact that she was like, "Yeah, my brother isn't really the talkative type," saying, pretending Kurt was her brother. Which is another thing that was kind of sad in this episode. Was the fact is he's like, "Okay, you might need these," and he's got a box, and she's like, "Oh, we're going undercover as a couple, a husband and wife again," and he's like, "No." And God opens it up in his earbud comms, and she's like, "Oh, okay." It seemed like she was a little disappointed because you almost see like her face kind of light up a little bit when you see that, just because it's like, I think even with everything said and done, her feelings for Kurt haven't really disappeared. And I think the same thing, I truly believe the same thing for Kurt. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't believe his feelings for her have gone away. His feelings for her are very, very complicated. But things get even more complicated when you take the fact is that, I mean, he actually told Allie, yes, that he wants to be a dad and that he's going to be a part of this. Because Allie's not suggesting for them to get together, especially not for the sake of the kid, because it's not good for them. Neither one of them being like getting back together, but it's like, she's like, Allie feels the need, like, if she has to, she can take care of this baby on her own, but there is a part of her that, I'm sure, absolutely appreciates the fact is that Kurt wants to be a part of it too. It just kind of puts a knot in his stomach. He probably hasn't brought it up, but I'm sure like issues with his own dad, it's kind of reasons enough to like, it's part of the reason why he's hesitant, but at the same time, probably another reason why he's willing to go for it, because he's like, I have to do better than my dad did, and I have to be a better example, be a better person for my child, like my dad wasn't for me, type of thing. And speaking of Kurt, we also ended up finding out that at the end of the episode, Naz kind of points it out after like kind of getting basically someone on the inside had basically their kind of mole on the inside for Sandstorm was sending them some information, and they lost contact with that person like 6 months ago. Well, the last thing they ended up sending them was a video showing the fact is Sandstorm has had their eye on Kurt for like 20 plus years. It's not just this whole like, using Taylor Shaw and Jane situation, Taylor using Jane as Taylor Shaw to manipulate Kurt is a lot more than that. They've had their eyes on him for a long time. For what purposes, who knows? But it seems like he is critical to their plan. That's why they put Jane in that situation, is because maybe the point is they feel like because maybe there's something about Kurt's past that makes them think like they can possibly turn him into an asset or something. I don't know. I mean, because what was going through my mind, I thought the news that Naz was going to tell him is the fact that it's like, the person that sent us this information was actually Jane. What if, like, you end up finding out that the fact is, like, Jane went along with all this stuff, but that was the only way she could keep her cover. That basically she was thinking maybe with enough, even if her memory was white, she felt like, when this is all comes back to it, she'll fight against Sandstorm. Maybe she was the one that was selling them out, because maybe eventually she got to the point she didn't believe in what they believed in anymore. It's like, yes, doing the right thing, but maybe we end up finding out that Remy eventually became more like who she is as Jane. Maybe there was a lot more crossover there, but it kind of like the way Roman was talking about her last episode makes you kind of think that's not the case, that they are very polar opposites to one another. So, and then also in this episode we had Reed dealing heavily, still struggling with the whole thing that Freddie told him. Freddie came to his house, stayed for a little while. Reed wanted to kind of give him a place to stay. Tasha ended up kicking him out at the end of the episode because of drugs and stuff like that. So she understood he had his issues, but she also knew that him being around with his issues wasn't going to make things easier on Reed. Reed's already got a lot on his plate and didn't need more added to it. He was acting a little out of character in this episode. Obviously, everyone knows that when he was chasing down that guy whose name is Shadowcat. That guy, he basically was beating him down, and then he kind of roughed up another guy at the art thing, And so Kurt ended up sending him to Borden, and he kind of talked to Borden, kind of opened up about things. Basically, he was like, he just wanted answers. Like, Borden's going to do his best to help him, but Borden was like, you have to be also accept the possibility that things might not work in your favor. Whether something did happen or something didn't happen, that might just be a blank to you. Maybe it'll be impossible to recover those memories, though. We did see him kind of stalking Coach Jones at the end of the episode, so hopefully, he doesn't try to take justice into his own hands and it's like, well, since the justice system won't do it, I'll do something about it. Or maybe that's just, because that's just going to end up in a very hairy situation. Either he's going to end up doing something to Coach Jones, or something's going to happen to Coach Jones, and because he was stalking him, like, Reed's going to be kind of the number one suspect type of situation. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe we'll get a situation where Freddy ended up killing him, but because Reed was stalking him and everything, it looks like Reed was the one that killed him, and Reed kind of has to cover his tracks to kind of get the team not on his case about it. Or, maybe like local police kind of bring it up and he gets arrested. It turns into a whole big scandalous situation. I mean, just throwing that out there as a hypothesis. Because we also have Tasha kind of doing her own thing, because she goes to Shadowcat and it's like, okay, I need you to do something for me. So I can only assume it's something connected to Reed. So maybe finding some other people that have some information about it, just because his government job is kind of gives him access to certain types of information. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see what she does in that regard. The fact is, Naz, I was talking about her a little bit earlier, but in this episode, when she was talking to Kurt near the end, she kind of brought up the fact, I forgot what it was exactly. She brought up something, and Kurt was like, how do you know that about me? And she's like, oh, I just read your file. He's like, oh, what kind of things are in that file? And it makes it seem like she is kind of leaking out the fact is that it does seem more so than anything that she is trying to learn more about the team, because just kind of to understand them better. It seems like for her, it's just kind of how she processes things. Like, she has to break people down like they're almost like math problems. That's kind of her way of understanding people, people are puzzles that need to be figured out. It's kind of how I feel like Naz views things. So overall, a very good episode, and I cannot wait to see what happens next time. But yeah, till the next time we meet, guys, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.